Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from Time, Lily Rothman, and tonight's guest, Greta Gerwig.
Great. Hi.
Hello. Hi, thanks for coming.
So we were just talking back there about how it's been sort of a long journey with this film. So when was the first sort of seed of Frances Ha?
Probably the first seed of Frances Ha was in, I guess, 2009. And then it took about a year to write it. And then, I mean, not a solid year. I was doing other things. That would be very slow. And then we shot it. God, you know, we shot it like over a longer period of time. I think the last shooting we did was in 2012, and then it premiered in 2012 at the TheRoxyTheatre Film Festival, and then it was bought, and then it was held until this past spring. So it's been an incredible journey, but it's also feels like it's been a very long gestation period.
And have your feelings about the film changed at all in that time?
Oh, I don't. No one's ever asked me that. I think. Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly. When I saw it, I mean, at one point it was just getting it done, and we were showing it to a lot of people to get feedback, and we were getting it ready to submit to festivals. But I'd never really seen it with an audience. And then when I saw it, I watched it at TheRoxyTheatre with an audience, and it was the greatest moment of my life thus far. And it was like sharing this thing that had been living inside of me as a writer and as an actor for so long with a room full of people, and feel them feel it was extraordinary. And so that experience, it's impossible to repeat that. And I think once that festival experience passed by, it became almost like when you've been to a beautiful place on a trip, but then you leave it behind and you keep going. It felt like a place I was one time.
So is seeing it now, or seeing, the trailer, like looking at pictures from that trip, or?
Yeah, it's like part of you, but it's not where you are now. So I feel like it's in my DNA now, but it's not something I'm living anymore.
So as a co-writer of the film, what was that first thing that sparked it in 2009?
Well, after I had acted in the film Greenberg, which Noah had written and directed, and long after we'd made it, and then they were editing it, and then sometime after it came out, Noah emailed me and asked me if I'd be interested in working with him on a movie that would be shot in New York, and that he was interested in doing in maybe a more pared down way, and if I had any ideas for that. And then I emailed him back. I had been writing over the past few years, but I hadn't finished anything because I'd been acting, and because probably I was scared and lazy. And so I sent him all these ideas, all these fragments of ideas and little scenes and snippets of dialogue, and in a document, and he liked it very much, and then he started adding things, and then really we just started trading back and forth this email document that grew into what the script has become. And since then I've written and completed more scripts, and I don't find the process that different. It's always sort of starts with almost like a lot of little clues that you don't even know what they mean, that you've written down over the years, and then you look at it's almost like you try to find a link between these things that seem disparate, and what is the life behind the moment, and just following those breadcrumbs.
And how does having gone through that process of developing the story affect it when you come to the time to act in the movie?
I find them to be very separate process it's not. I mean, because the script writing process and the acting process were very distinct, and there's no improvisation, and we didn't change the script once we were on set. So really, the script was the script, and then it existed as a document, and then we started casting all the roles. And I felt like I was first approaching it from the position of auditioning other actors, which was really fun and really terrifying. So I was trying to find Frances while they were trying to find their characters they were auditioning for. And it's funny because it didn't really help me that I had written it in acting, because in some ways there's like practical decisions you're making while you're writing, because you know, in a certain scene, okay, this piece of information needs to get out, and you find ways to get the information out and disguise it as best you can so it doesn't feel like exposition. But there's like an element of writing that's very nuts and bolts. But then when you're an actor, you can never say anything because you're saying it because we need to know it for the next scene. It has to be motivated by another reason. So in some ways, it's like another turn of the creative wheel. And you know, maybe great writers, it's all combined, and there's always a reason. But I think, you know, for me, sometimes you just need to get information out.
So I think we have a clip we should take a look at, the "What are we going to do today" scene.
Great.
So one of the things I was thinking about in terms of sort of talking about this movie today is I was reading an article about how in Sweden at some movie theaters they're going to start rating movies by the Bechdel test, which sort of determines how a movie stacks up on a feminist scale. And one of the,
it's like how many women have names.
Yeah.
Do they ever have a conversation with each other where they don't talk about men?
Yeah, exactly.
There's like all these,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about the relationship between Frances and Sophie. And I mean, in this scene, they do talk about a boy, but that so much of the film is their relationship. Yeah. And, as someone who writes a movie and then appears in it, that one of the reasons you might do that is if there aren't the kind of roles that you want. I mean, how do you feel about the state of roles available for a woman in Hollywood?
It's complicated because I think clearly there just is a dearth of speaking roles for women. I think there was a USC study done last year, and it's something like 28% of speaking roles are for women. So, I mean, it's just statistically there are fewer. That being said, I feel like every year I see female performances that are incredible, and they're totally fully formed humans, and they're great actresses taking on great roles. I mean, I think clearly there are not enough, but I didn't write it because I thought, I'm not getting the kinds of roles I want. I've actually gotten to play really great female roles that I didn't write, and I'm very grateful for that. But I certainly think it needs to be better. It needs to be better than it is. I think there are lots of women who are really talented and writing interesting stuff and doing their part. So hopefully it just will get better.
And in terms of that relationship in Frances Ha between these best friends, how do you think that sort of, in terms of as a story, compares to a story of a romance, which is something we see much more often as the central relationship?
Well, I think my interest in this goes back to actually college. I took a lot of playwriting classes. I wanted to be a playwright, and I wrote a play about friends, a group of friends, and I remember my playwriting teacher told me, it doesn't matter. There are no stakes because everyone knows that you just aren't going to be friends at some point. Nobody believes that this will work, and I think to me, I was like, but that, first of all, I felt like that's exactly why you should write a play or a movie about it, because it's inherently tragic. You will not marry your best friend. But it also, I feel like, this is my own ranting about, I guess, women in film, but I mean, I think there are so many more stories than falling in love or not falling in love. And I think it's almost, I feel like it's our responsibility to find narratives that don't include that and that are real stories, because I think that stories do exist outside of their specifics, and there are forms to stories that we want. And I really believe in good nuts and bolts storytelling, but I think that there are more than just love stories for women. So, I mean, in even this movie, it is a love story in some way, even though it's a friendship love story.
And did you end up convincing your playwriting professor?
No, I think she probably thinks this movie's worthless.
So, having studied playwriting, how does that compare to screenwriting?
I mean, I can't really. I've never been published as a playwright or any. I mean, I mean, I got rejected by Yale Drama School, so I don't. I mean, that's my only claim to that. So I don't. I mean, I can't. For me, I don't. I wouldn't really have the ability to say, oh, this is how it's different. I mean, I will say, I tend to really overwrite my scenes, and I think it shows up in Frances, but in a nice way. There's all these little moments and then long scenes where people are just in a room together, and I think that's a little bit because of me. I mean, it's because of Noah too, but because my instinct is to always make like 10-minute scenes, which is in some ways anti-cinematic, but I think like with so many things, if you can make something about you that's kind of doesn't fit the mold or is kind of a failing into your signature, then maybe it'll work for you. So I've just embraced the fact that I write really long scenes.
So you mentioned earlier that when the movie was first being conceived, that part of the idea was to film in New York, and we're here in New York. So how does the city figure as a character in the movie?
Well, I think, I mean, I think in a lot of ways. I think, I mean, in that scene we just watched, there's the line, she says, "Do you want to see my room?" And a few other characters say that in the course of the film. And something that we talked about was, when's the last appropriate time in your life that you can say, "Do you want to see my room?" And I think because New York is so expensive and so daunting, that age gets pushed a lot closer to 30 than maybe in other places. And I think the hardness of the city of being successful here, and the beauty of, I mean, I love New York so much, it's hard for me to even talk about it in an analytical way. I love it, and I've been very lucky, but I certainly spent a couple of lean years here, and there's something terrifying about that, because if you're not from here and you don't have anything to fall back on, it really is like, if 3 things go wrong this week, I have to go home, which is a terrible feeling, but it's also, when it goes right, it's so tremendously exciting and thrilling, and you feel like you're part of a tradition of going to this city to seek your fortune.
And with the black and white, is that at all a reference to Manhattan, the movie?
It was the decision to shoot in black and white was very intuitive, and I mean, we did a lot of camera tests and really tried to get that sort of silvery, soft black and white that's in the movie. But it was as much about I think some of the French New Wave films as it was about Woody Allen. But I think it was also because we were making it on our own terms, and we were making a movie about women in which, there's no fire war, nobody dies, nobody has sex. Because we were doing something like that, we also felt like, let's make it exactly how we want to make it. We want to make it in black and white, and we can do it. We're making it exactly how we want, and it seemed like it was a tribute to our love of a certain kind of cinema.
Was there anything that you thought, if we're going to make a movie exactly the way we want, let's do it this way, and then it wasn't possible?
We originally were doing this close-ups of different, not in a pornographic way, but just as a piecemeal of parts of Frances's body, like her neck or her ankle or her knee, and it's based on. I was inspired by not Claire's Knee, but one of the Romer films, which I'll remember in a second. But like flourishes like that, we would try some of them, and then ultimately we pared a lot of them back because we felt it was. It was heavy-handed and it interfered with the story, but we did everything we wanted to do. It didn't all end up in the movie.
So let's watch the other clip we have. So, how much of Frances is you?
I mean, I put a lot of me in there, but I also put a lot of other people in there. Some of them weren't so happy about it. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to tease it out. I would say when Noah and I have talked about it, I see it as almost like the way some actors have creations of characters that seem it's not them, but it could have only come from them, and I think David Thewlis in Naked is one example of that, which he developed that character with Mike Leigh. I think Mike Leigh characters in general have that quality. The actors they're not playing themselves, but it's some resonant string deep inside of them that they're plucking and mirroring out. And so, I mean, I've had a very different life from Frances, and I'm a very different kind of a person. But I don't think. I mean, it sounds arrogant, but I think probably only I could have created her.
And how does the experience of playing a character that sort of is so, inherently connected to yourself compare to playing a character that you had no part in creating?
It's not that different, except for I guess for me, if I don't understand a piece of writing, I have a lot of trouble with it. If I understand the writing, I'm okay. I mean, for example, Whit Stillman's Damsels in Distress, it was totally unlike me, and it's not how I talk. But I could hear the writing when I read it. I could almost hear the rhythm of it, and I felt it in my body. I knew where it was supposed to be. And in some ways, I find that exists more in plays than in screenplays, because very often in plays, the rhythm is set by the words, and you're watching the actors perform in real time. And I think so often in film, the rhythm is set by the editing, so it doesn't respond as much to rhythms. But I can't do it any other way. It's hard for me to. I always feel like I'm faking it if I can't hear it. So for me, it's really not whether I wrote it or didn't write it, or if it's close to me or it's not close to me. But if I can't hear it, I almost can't do it.
So before we go to the Q&A, sort of changing the subject a little bit, I wanted to ask you about the Arcade Fire video that you appeared in recently, a live music video. Can you tell us how that sort of came to be?
Yeah, that's. I loved doing that. That was great. I guess Spike Jonze had seen this movie and liked it, and
so it's not totally changing the subject.
No, it is related to Frances. I don't know if that's why but he was. He emailed my agent and said, "I have this crazy idea. I'm doing this thing. Does she want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, that's amazing." I mean, it's like because I love dancing. I mean, obviously I love dancing. I love dancers, but I'm like so far from actually being a professional dancer, and nowhere in my life did I ever think I would be dancing in a music video. But it's always, I think, if I'm honest with myself, secretly what I've always wanted to do. So it was sort of like this completely unexpected great thing that happened. And it was very quick. We rehearsed and put it together in a week and did it. And it's kind of the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah, what was the experience like on the night of?
Really scary. It was scary. It was scary because it was live, but it was also forever because it was filmed. So it was combining the two scariest elements of performing, I think. But it was exhilarating. It must be what it feels like to be a musician or to play or a stand-up comedian. Or it had that immediacy that I think. It's intoxicating, but it also causes you to have a tremor. You're so scared, but it worked out.
Yeah, so I think we have a couple minutes to take some questions.
Hi, really like the movie. I know you mentioned Romer, and the other day I was watching Bad Blood, the Carax film, and I remembered the David Bowie, musical singing and all that, and I was wondering if that maybe inspired a little bit of Frances Ha, and kind of what other films maybe inspired you while you were writing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I love Leos Carax, and particularly I really love Denis Lavant, who did that scene, and we weren't specifically thinking of that when we made it. It was just sort of, we had written in this exuberant running scene, and then we shot it, and then as they were editing it, we were trying all these different pieces of music, and then we were just like, Leo's figured out the best song to run to, and it's Modern Love, and we put it in there. But I think there's definitely the Romer films and Truffaut films that were sort of portrait of youth films were very influential. And there's a film called A Single Girl, which is Jacques Benoit, and that was very influential. There's a number of people, actually a lot of books that we were looking at. It always sort of felt like, in some ways, I think the reason Romer was resonant is because his films always feel literary. There's something about the scripts that feel like they're very written, and there's a lot of people just talking about ideas. And I think when we were setting out to write the script, we wanted it to feel like, almost like you could see it as a collection of short stories in a way, or something that felt more literary. So I think we were looking at those movies for that.
Hey, one of the most dramatic moments in the film for me was when Frances, not Greta, Frances is turning down the secretary position even though she's been broke this whole time. And the theme, that kind of theme, like, it resonates when I watch Girls too, the HBO thing, and about like the character arc of creative people sort of refusing pridefully or whatever, and then eventually accepting employment, like uncreative employment. And I was wondering how much of that theme comes up when you discuss these kinds of, like, young person chasing dreams in the city, that kind of vibe.
Well, I mean, it was something. I mean, I hope I'm not ruining it for anyone, but I mean, Frances does have to. She rejects it, but then she makes a very practical decision of. In some ways, she gives up on a certain version of that dream, and I think, obviously, go for your dreams, follow what you love. But I do think that we wanted to make a movie where a character makes an incredibly practical decision, and then the movie rewards that practical decision with something that's romantic, even though she seems to have given up on a certain version of the dream. And I think I think you should chase your dreams, but I also think, I mean, I'm 30 and I know lots of people who are in different stages of their journeys of becoming artists, but I think sometimes, especially in New York, when you're surrounded by so much hyper success, there's an idea that there's only one way to be an artist and one way to be successful, and that's to be rewarded financially for it and be in a magazine. And it's seductive, but it's just, I think it's not the only way, and I think sometimes people can get a little myopic about it and think that if I don't have this kind of crazy 0.001 success, I can't do my art. And we wanted to show a woman who found a way to do her art no matter what. And I think that takes a lot of practicality, and I think practicality takes courage.
Good evening, Greta. Thanks for coming out tonight. In that first clip, as someone who's been working on this headstand, I got to say you did that fairly effortlessly. Did you something you learned for the film, or you've been practicing yoga for a while?
No, I'd been doing yoga for a while, but we did that scene. I think we did that like 37 times. So I had a lot of blood in my head.
So you said you have a tendency of overwriting sometimes when you write a film or whatever you're writing for. What sort of TV shows or series do you think are really well written that you're watching now? And it's two questions. And are you considering writing any sort of series for your overextended writing?
You know, I'm actually like the worst person. I don't do it. I don't. It's not bad. I know there's like amazing shows, and I watched like the first season of. I've watched the first season of a lot of things, and I thought they were great. I watched the first season of Breaking Bad, but I don't know. I have no plans on writing television, but I think there's obviously great television being written. I watch Girls. I mean, Lena's great. I watch occasionally New Girl on the plane, which I think is really funny. But I'm like, I know I'm like missing the golden age of all time. But I always feel like I'm saving it up for, like, I'm gonna get mono when I'm 40, and then I'll watch all of them.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, everyone, and thanks, Greta.
Thank you. Life thus far, and it was like sharing this thing that had been living inside of me as a writer and as an actor for so long with a room full of people and feel them feel it was extraordinary. And so that experience, it's impossible to repeat that. And I think once that festival experience passed by, it became almost like when you've been to a beautiful place on a trip, but then you leave it behind and you keep going. It felt like a place I was one time.
So is seeing it now, or seeing, the trailer, like looking at pictures from that trip, or?
Yeah, it's like part of you, but it's not where you are now. So I feel like it's in my DNA now, but it's not.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from Time, Lily Rothman, and tonight's guest, Greta Gerwig.
Great. Hi.
Hello. Hi, thanks for coming.
So we were just talking back there about how it's been sort of a long journey with this film. So when was the first sort of seed of Frances Ha?
Probably the first seed of Frances Ha was in, I guess, 2009, and then it took about a year to write it, and then, not a solid year. I was doing other things. That would be very slow. And then we shot it. God, we shot it like over a longer period of time. I think the last shooting we did was in 2012, and then it premiered. Hadn't finished anything because I'd been acting, and because probably I was scared and lazy, and so I sent him all these ideas, all these fragments of ideas and little scenes and snippets of dialogue and in a document, and he liked it very much, and then he started adding things, and then really we just started trading back and forth this email document that grew into what the script has become. And since then I've written and completed more scripts, and I don't find the process that different. It's always sort of starts with almost like a lot of little clues that you don't even know what they mean that you've written down over the years, and then you look at it's almost like you try to find a link between these things that seem disparate, and what is the life behind the moment, and just following those bread. In 2012 at the TheRoxyTheatre Film Festival, and then it was bought, and then it was held until this past spring. So it's been an incredible journey, but it's also feels like it's been a very long gestation period.
And have your feelings about the film changed at all in that time?
Oh, I don't. No one's ever asked me that. I think. Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly. When I saw it, I mean, at one point it was just getting it done, and we were showing it to a lot of people to get feedback, and we were getting it ready to submit to festivals. But I'd never really seen it with an audience. And then when I saw it, I watched it at TheRoxyTheatre with an audience, and it was the greatest moment of my life. Something I'm living anymore.
So, as a co-writer of the film, what was that first thing that sparked it in 2009?
Well, after I had acted in the film Greenberg, which Noah had written and directed, and long after we'd made it, and then they were editing it, and then sometime after it came out, Noah emailed me and asked me if I'd be interested in working with him on a movie that would be shot in New York, and that he was interested in doing in maybe a more pared down way, and if I had any ideas for that. And then I emailed him back. I had been writing over the past few years, but I